Well, here we are out on Eufaula. I am currently headed to my first spot of the day. I'm not gonna make it there before first cast, which is at 6 a.m. That's probably about 5 minutes until first cast, but I'll be getting there just after first cast, I would assume. And been catching them fishing a shad spawn. Doesn't look like anybody has followed me. I'm more than a mile away from the ramp now, so as far as kayaks go, I may see some guys here later, but I don't mind if they come later. This is a shad spawn bite. I think the best fishing will probably be over by 9 a.m. and after 10, it'll get tough to catch them. When it gets tough, my plan is to go look for some fish guarding fry. I found a couple in practice doing that, but they're pretty scattered. Also yesterday, I found one that's probably 6 pounds on a bed, but it's right beside the boat ramp, and I'm fishing between 1.5 miles and 3 miles away from the boat ramp. So if I fish for that fish, it's gonna be, I go out, catch a good limit, and then head back to try to see if that fish is still there. But yeah, looking forward to getting fishing. I'm frustrated having to pedal all this way, but hopefully it'll pay off. Got y'all at kind of a weird angle because I have to go under docks, so I got to keep the camera kind of lower. This isn't my starting spot, but I'm gonna make a couple casts here because lines in already happened, and it's like a 2-cast spot to maybe get one. I don't catch any at this first stop, but it's a really good example of what I'm targeting. Anytime I had some seawalls and riprap, particularly around the docks, that was where I was catching these fish early in the morning on a white chatterbait. And for the most part, I could tell exactly where I was going to get bit, and if I wasn't getting bit in that exact spot, then there was no way for me to catch a random fish here and there just going down the bank. So I was just hitting the very high percentage areas and moving on. Lost the first fish of the day. Not exactly how you want to start it out, but it was pretty encouraging to get bit quickly, because even though you have a good idea of what's going to happen, there's always that thought in the back of your mind that your bite is going to completely disappear. And my bite just about did that, honestly. If you look at the seawall in this clip right here, you can see where that water line was. They dropped the bottom out of the lake. I knew the lake was coming down, but I didn't realize how much they were going to drop it. And I was hoping that maybe it would stabilize, but it didn't. It stayed coming down throughout the whole tournament, and anybody who bass fishes knows that falling water is the worst thing you can have during a tournament. This seawall right here in practice, I caught a couple fish off of, and I didn't even know that some of this willow grass existed because the water was so much higher in practice. And so, you know, I knew that I was not going to get as many bites, and the bite was going to get a lot tougher, but I didn't have anything else to go to, so I had to stick with it. I apologize for the camera angle in this video, but this clip shows exactly why I had to do it that way. You can see the horrendous shad spawn occurring in this clip right here. There was just waves and waves of shad moving through this area. And I didn't actually want that. I was fishing a shad spawn bite, but I was just fishing stuff that shad spawn on, so seawalls and riprap. But if I was seeing the shad spawning, I was not catching fish, and I was not seeing fish eating those shad. I think that there just weren't that many fish up on these places, and in order for you to get bit, you had to find somewhere that there was a fish waiting for some shad to come by, but there weren't actually any shad there that you had to compete with. This is also something that I heard a lot of other fishermen who were at the awards ceremony say, that they needed to fish a shad spawn bite but not actually be around the spawning shad, so there was obviously something to it. number one. Got one. Probably like a 13, 14 incher again. Well, the camera didn't turn on, but got number 3. What you don't see here is that I actually caught this fish off of a dock. And if you'll notice, my catches are coming off of docks and not the riprap that I had planned on fishing. I had actually just spent a few minutes fishing through what I thought was my best stretch of riprap, and I didn't catch anything. And I came back into the pocket, caught one off of a dock, and I think what happened was there just wasn't enough water on the riprap, so these fish had transitioned to the next piece of shallow cover. So I'm still right where I just released that fish, and in practice I was really surprised I didn't catch a fish when I fished right here because it had this great riprap. I knew it was a place that should have one, so I decided to come back during the tournament. But you can see that water line over my right shoulder there. I mean, that water has dropped a ton. And so even though I don't catch this next fish off of the riprap, you can see that dock up there in front of me to the right, very, very close to this area that these fish were just on. And like I said, I think, you know, the water dropped and they didn't have a choice but to leave. And so they started hanging out on the next thing closest by. That's a little something. Nicer one there. So the unfortunate thing about a shad spawn is that though it can be fast and furious, when it stops, it stops. I caught that last fish at 7:30, and after that, I did not have another bite. I had some other stuff in the area, including a main lake point that I felt really good about that I was going to check after things slowed down. I spent a lot of time after that bite started to die off, and I caught that last fish. I stuck with the shaded banks, you know, the shaded side of pockets and whatnot that I was heading into, because sometimes that bite will last for a little longer if you target that shade. It didn't. I think the dropping water just really changed things. I was catching a lot more fish in practice, and that dropping water just completely hurt every type of bite you could have had for this tournament. And right now, I'm coming around the corner to that main lake point, and you can see that boat is sitting there. That happens, that's fishing, and unfortunately, right as I'm rounding the corner, you know, he's sitting on exactly where I want to be, and I see him catch a fish. After the practice I had and talking to other fishermen, I knew that this was definitely going to be the toughest tournament we've had so far this season. And so I knew that all I really needed to do was catch 5 fish each day. And with the size of fish I was around, even though they weren't big, there were enough of them mixed in that were, you know, 15 inches or so that I knew I would probably get a check if I could just catch 5 both days. Well, at this point, it's 10 a.m. and I'm sitting on 4 fish and I haven't had a bite for 2.5 hours. And I've fished through all the stuff that was my backup plan for after the bite slowed down from the morning. So I'm really scratching my head and wondering what the heck to do. Right here, I'm sitting on a main lake point. It's a seawall, which was really good to be around. Seawalls were great. And there were some rocks out in front of it that I'd caught a couple fish off of in practice. But the difference was in practice, there was a lot more wind here. And so I was concerned that I just wasn't going to be able to catch them. I fished through it anyway and did not have any bites right here, and this was another spot I was banking on. I felt that the wind was really important for this spot, and fortunately while I was there it started to pick up, so I hung out for a minute and fished around so I could go and fish it again after that wind had been pushing onto the point for a little bit. Know if that one was gonna happen or not. I think he's 12. Old spotted bass. I knew he was here. In practice, all of the fry guarding fish were in the very, very backs of pockets and creeks, and some of them were really nice. I saw 2 of them in practice that were probably both 18-inch fish. I came back to the back of one of those creeks to check it out and see if that fish was still there, and the water had dropped so much that I knew there was no chance at any of these fry guarding fish sticking around, at least in the places that I had already found them. So fished around, he wasn't there. The spot that's over my right shoulder right now is where that fish was in practice, and there was significantly less water there, so it made complete sense that he wasn't there anymore. You'll recognize this spot from earlier. This is right where I caught 2 of my keepers, and it was extremely close to what had been the best stretch of riprap during practice. I decided that it would be a good idea for me to head to the back of this pocket and see if there were any fish lingering back there, because as soon as you get past this little point that you can see in front of me, it dropped off to probably 6 feet deep in there and had a lot of depth to it, which would keep those fish a little more comfortable with the dropping water if there were any fish that were lingering around after the spawn or guarding fry. Pulling out all the stops. 15 1/4. While I was unhooking and measuring that fish, I saw a boil right back in the back of this pocket up against the rocks, which would be indicative of a potential fry guarding fish. It was something I hadn't seen yet, so I moseyed my way back there and pitched a wacky worm where I had seen the boil. A little bass. But I'm fishing a tournament and he may end up being worth some money. 14 and a quarter, going back. Definitely a tougher day than what I was hoping for. However, I had kind of hit the point where I knew that I could maybe start laying off of my fish because I was watching the leaderboard and I was sitting in good enough position, and I knew that as tough as it was, if I could duplicate what I had already done on the following day, and I'd probably get a check. I'd probably get inside the top 17, which is what they were paying at this tournament. I'm still in that same pocket. I'm probably only 150 yards from where I just caught those two. And I knew there was a brush pile out here. How did I know that? Because every darn bass boat that came in here would pull up and fish out here. They were all throwing spinner baits at it, and I didn't see anybody catch a fish, but I was thinking, well, maybe I should go figure out where that pile is at, because tomorrow my bite may change and I may need to know where that pile is so I don't waste time trying to find it. I've already got some fish today, so let me go look for that pile and see where it is out here. That's a good cast. The scope. I don't really want to burn them. I gotta think about tomorrow now. I don't know how anybody feels about me seeing people fishing a brush pile and then going and fishing a brush pile. More than one boat did it. And if you look right in front of my kayak here, that is my best stretch of riprap, or what had been my best stretch of riprap in practice. And I knew that those fish had to have gone somewhere, and the fact that there's a brush pile right here, I'm going to fish it. Especially because it's clearly no secret, because all the bass boats I saw were stopping on it. And normally, you know, I wouldn't stray from my bite to fish something that somebody else was doing, especially when they didn't catch anything. That would be like seeing somebody fish a dock and they don't catch anything and you go, oh, maybe I'll go fish that dock. But things were so bad, it just made sense that those fish would probably slide out there to that pile. I could see a small school of fish in that pile, and there was one off to the side that was larger than the others, so I fished it for a little longer. But once I caught that last fish you just saw that was 13.5 inches, I knew that those fish were just going to be too valuable on day 2, and it was not worth me continuing to fish. At that point, I was running kind of low on time, and I decided to head back to the boat ramp so I would have at least half an hour to fish in the event that that big bedfish that I had seen the day before was still there, or at least the male, which was also a nice size fish. But as with all the other fry guarding and shallow fish that I had located in practice, the water had dropped too much, and they were all just, you know, I didn't see any of them, but also in addition to them not being around the areas I had seen them, they probably didn't want to bite either if they were up shallow. Dropping water just puts fish in an awful mood to try to fish for them. That's a wrap on day 1. It was really tough fishing across the board. 177 anglers in this tournament, and only 32 people caught limits on the first day. Day 2, the fishing was not a whole lot more interesting, but I had a little encounter on the water that was the first of its kind for me. So you'll have to stay tuned for that video. It should be a fun one to watch.